The stars had seen many terrible things, but few creatures inspired as much fear as the dragon Yura. Her name alone made entire planets tremble. For 10,000 years, she had flown through the darkness of space, leaving destruction wherever she went. Her scales were once bright like diamonds, but now they were black as night. Her eyes glowed red with ancient anger. She was not just big. She was massive beyond understanding. When she spread her wings, they could cover entire moons. When she breathed fire, it could melt through the hull of any spaceship ever built. Long ago, Yura had been different. The oldest records said she was once worshipped as a god. Civilizations brought her gifts. They built temples in her honor. They sang songs about her beauty and power. But something changed inside her. Maybe it was the passage of too much time. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was simply her nature. Whatever the reason, Yura grew cruel. She stopped protecting the beings who worshipped her. Instead, she began to hurt them. At first, it was small acts of violence. A ship destroyed here. A settlement burned there. But her cruelty grew like a disease. She attacked trade routes for fun. She destroyed colonies just to hear the screams. She took pleasure in causing pain. The galaxy tried to reason with her. Ambassadors came with offers of peace. Scientists tried to understand what made her act this way. Religious leaders begged her to remember her old self. Nothing worked. Yura only laughed at their attempts. Her laughter sounded like metal scraping against metal. For centuries, the different species of the galaxy fought among themselves. They could not agree on anything. But Yura gave them something they could all agree on. She became their common enemy. Every species, from the smallest to the greatest, wanted her stopped. The Galactic Council was formed partly because of her. It was the first time so many different beings worked together for one goal. They sent armies after her, fleets of warships with weapons that could destroy planets. But Yura was too strong, too fast, too clever. She destroyed every force they sent. Thousands of soldiers died trying to stop her. The galaxy mourned its dead and tried again. They developed new weapons. They created special technology designed just to fight her. Nothing worked. Yura seemed impossible to kill. Some began to think she truly was immortal. The council met in secret for months. They argued and debated. If they could not kill her, what could they do? A scientist named Bowman had an idea. He was old and tired from years of war. His idea was simple, but horrible. They could not destroy Yura, but they could trap her. They could exile her somewhere she could never escape, somewhere she could never hurt anyone again. They chose Taiwan 7, a dead moon orbiting a dying star. The moon had no life, no water on its surface, no breathable air, just gray rocks and dust that stretched forever. It had gravity strong enough to trap even a dragon, but it had nothing else. It was a prison made by nature itself. The council built a device that could open a portal in space. It took all their combined technology. It took the wealth of 100 worlds. But they did it. The trap was set near a busy trade route. They put out fake distress signals. Yura, who loved attacking helpless ships, came eagerly. But when she arrived, there were no ships to destroy. Instead, the portal opened beneath her. Even Yura, with all her power, could not fight the pull of the portal. She roared with rage as it dragged her down. Her roars shook the fabric of space itself. Ships hundreds of light years away detected the sound. But the portal swallowed her anyway. When Yura crashed onto Taiwan 7, she immediately tried to escape. She flew upward with all her strength. But the gravity pulled her back down. She tried again and again, each time falling back to the gray dust. She screamed her fury until her throat was raw. She breathed fire at the sky, but the flames just disappeared into nothing. There was no one to hear her, no one to fear her. She was alone. The galaxy celebrated. News spread across every system. The monster was gone. Children would grow up without fearing her name. Trade routes were safe again. Colonies could be built without worry. There were festivals and parades. Songs were written about the victory. The soldiers who died fighting her were honored as heroes. The council was praised for their wisdom. Peace had finally come. But on Tay-17, Yura was changing in ways no one could see. Isolation is a terrible thing. For a creature who had lived for 10,000 years among the stars, being trapped on one small moon was torture. At first, her rage kept her strong. She spent years trying to escape. She dug into the ground with her claws, thinking maybe she could tunnel through to the other side. She found only more rock. As time passed, something worse than rage came. Madness began to creep into her mind. She talked to herself because there was no one else. She saw things that were not there. Memories of her old life mixed with hallucinations. Sometimes she thought she was still flying through space. She would run across the gray dust, trying to take off, only to remember she was trapped. Her body began to fail too. Dragons are meant to fly. They are meant to move through space. Being stuck on a planet was like asking a fish to live on land. Her muscles grew weak. Her magnificent wings, which once carried her between stars, now dragged on the ground. Her scales, already blackened by her crimes, began to crack and break. Wounds appeared on her body. Without the ability to properly clean herself, the wounds became infected. Yura tried to clean her wounds, but her body was too big and her claws too large. She could not reach many places. The infections grew worse. Her scales began to weep a dark fluid. The proud dragon who once terrified the galaxy became a festering, suffering creature. Her roars of rage became roars of pain, but there was no one to hear them. The galaxy had forgotten about her. They had moved on with their lives. Years turned into decades. Decades turned into centuries. Yura stopped trying to escape. She stopped roaring. She just existed, lying in the dust, suffering. Sometimes she wished for death. But dragons do not die easily. She was trapped in a body that would not let her go. The once mighty terror of the galaxy had become something pitiful, something broken, something forgotten. And that is how she stayed, alone on the gray moon, as the universe went on without her. Deho returned the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every morning he made the long walk over the mountains. He brought water, clean cloths, and medical supplies he had ordered from the Federation supply network. He brought antibiotics meant for livestock. He figured if they worked on Earth animals, they might help a dragon. He brought salves and ointments. He brought bandages, though most were far too small to be useful on such a massive creature. The dragon watched him approach each day. At first, she remained tense and suspicious. This was probably a trick, some elaborate torture designed by the Council. But days turned into weeks, and the small human just kept coming. He never tried to hurt her. He never even raised his voice. He just worked, quietly, patiently, cleaning her wounds one by one. Yura tested him, of course. On the 5th day, she roared at him when he arrived. A full roar that shook the ground and echoed off the mountains. Deho stopped walking and waited for the roar to end. Then he continued forward as if nothing had happened. On the 8th day, she breathed fire into the air above his head. The flames came so close he could feel the heat. Deho looked up at the fire, then down at his supplies, then continued walking. He did not run. He did not shout. He just kept coming. On the 12th day, Yura spoke to him for the first time. Her voice was rough from centuries of screaming into the void. It sounded like grinding stone. She asked him why he was helping her, why he was not afraid. Deho looked at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged and went back to cleaning a wound on her side. He did not answer with words. His actions were his answer. He was helping because she needed help. It was that simple. The dragon did not understand. No one in 10,000 years had done something for her without wanting something in return. Civilizations had worshipped her because they wanted protection. The Council had exiled her because they wanted peace. Everyone wanted something, but this farmer wanted nothing. He never asked for payment.
He never asked for gratitude.
He never even asked for her name. He just came every day and worked. Slowly, Yura began to relax around him. She stopped testing him with roars and fire. She started to help him reach difficult wounds by adjusting her position. When Deho pointed to a spot on her back that he could not reach, she would carefully lower herself so he could climb up. She was always gentle with him. One wrong move could crush him, and she was very aware of that. She began to look forward to his visits. The pain in her body was lessening, but more importantly, the pain in her heart was easing too. Weeks became months. The change in Yura was remarkable. The infections cleared up. Her wounds began to heal. Her scales, which had been cracked and dull, started to regain some of their old luster. She was not beautiful yet, but she was no longer the festering nightmare she had been. More importantly, her mind was healing. The madness that had gripped her for so long began to fade. Having a routine helped. Having someone who cared, even silently, helped more. Daiho noticed the changes too. The dragon seemed calmer, more aware. Her eyes, which had been wild and unfocused, now tracked him with intelligence. She started to make small sounds when he arrived, not roars, but something softer, almost like a greeting. He found himself talking to her sometimes, even though she rarely responded. He told her about his farm, about the crops that were growing, about the chickens that still had trouble with the low gravity. Simple talk about simple things. One day, about 4 months after he first found her, Yura spoke to him again. She asked him his name. Daiho, still focused on cleaning a wound, simply said his name. No title, no explanation, just Daiho. The dragon was quiet for a moment. Then she told him her name. Yura. She said it softly, almost ashamed. She expected him to recognize it, to realize who she was, to finally understand the terrible monster he had been helping. But Daiho just nodded and said it was a nice name. Then he went back to work. Yura could not help it. She laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound. She had not laughed in thousands of years. She had forgotten what it felt like. This human genuinely did not know who she was. He had no idea he was caring for the most feared creature in galactic history. He just saw an injured animal that needed help. The simplicity of it was beautiful. For the first time since her exile, Yura felt something close to happiness. As time went on, they developed an understanding. It was not quite friendship. Daiho was too practical for such concepts, and Yura was too damaged to fully trust anyone. But it was something, a connection between two beings who did not quite fit in the universe. Daiho had never been comfortable with other humans. Too much talking, too many expectations. But he was comfortable with Yura. She did not expect him to be anything other than what he was. Yura had spent her life being feared or hated. Even when she was worshipped, it was based on fear. People bowed to her power, not to her. But Daiho did not fear her. He did not worship her either. He just treated her with basic dignity, like any living thing deserved. It was such a small thing, dignity, but to someone who had been denied it for so long, it meant everything. 6 months after he found her, Yura was almost completely healed. Her scales had regained much of their shine, though they would never be the diamond brightness of her youth. The black remained, a permanent reminder of her past crimes, but she no longer looked like a monster. She looked like a dragon, old, scarred, but alive. Her mind was clearer than it had been in centuries. The isolation had broken something inside her, but Daiho's patient care had given her the space to heal. One day, Daiho arrived with a different kind of supply. He had brought seeds, not for his farm, but for the valley where Yura lived. He explained in his simple way that the valley had good drainage. With some work, things could grow here. Yura could have a garden. She looked at the tiny seeds in his large, calloused hand. Then she looked at her own massive claws. She told him she could not plant such small things. Her claws were too big. Daiho smiled, something he did not do often. He said she could do other things. She could help prepare the soil. So they worked together. Daiho showed Yura how to use her fire breath at low intensity, not to destroy but to warm the cold soil, to help break down the rocks into smaller pieces. It took practice. Yura had only ever used her fire to destroy. Using it to create something was strange. But she learned. She was careful and precise. When Daiho said the soil was ready, he planted the seeds, fast-growing plants that could survive in harsh conditions. Weeks later, the first green shoots appeared. Yura stared at them in wonder. She had not seen anything grow in all her time on this dead moon. These tiny plants struggling up through the gray soil were beautiful. She asked Daiho what they would become. He told her they would be flowers. Simple, hardy flowers. Nothing fancy, but they would bring color to the valley. Yura touched one of the shoots gently with the tip of her claw. She was very careful not to damage it. As the plants grew, something else grew too. Trust. Real trust. Yura began to tell Daiho about her past, not all at once but in small pieces. She told him about the old days when she was worshipped, about how the loneliness of living so long had twisted her, about the terrible things she had done. She expected him to judge her, to finally realize the monster she was and leave. But Deho just listened. When she finished, he nodded and said that she seemed different now, that people could change if they wanted to. Then he asked if she wanted to help him carry water for the plants. And just like that, the conversation moved on. Yura realized something important. Deho was not forgiving her. He was not absolving her of her crimes. He was simply treating her like she was capable of being better. He was giving her the chance to be different. No grand speeches, no dramatic moments. Just quiet work and simple kindness. It was the most profound gift anyone had ever given her. The galaxy had tried punishment. They had tried abandonment. But this one human had tried something no one else had. He had tried basic decency. And somehow it was working. The council chambers were designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretched high above, making visitors feel small. The seats for council members rose in tiers, looking down on whoever stood at the center. Thousands of species were represented here, from the silicon-based Krell to the energy beings of the Luminous Collective. Every chair held someone powerful, someone important. The chamber could hold thousands, and today it was full. Everyone wanted to see this. Yura stood at the center. She had to. She was too large to fit anywhere else. Even with the chamber's massive size, her presence filled the space. Deho stood beside her, looking very small in comparison. He wore simple clothes, the same kind he wore on the farm. He had refused the formal attire they offered him. Hijin stood nearby in full military dress uniform. She was there as both escort and witness. The three of them faced the assembled might of the galaxy. The High Counselor, a being named Ithara from one of the oldest species in the galaxy, spoke first. Her voice carried through the chamber without technology. It was a voice that had pronounced judgments for 300 years. She addressed Yura directly. She recounted the dragon's crimes, the destruction, the deaths, the terror. The list went on for nearly an hour. Yura listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not make excuses. When Ithara finished, she asked Yura if she had anything to say in her defense. Yura lowered her great head. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. She said she had no defense. Everything the council said was true. She had done terrible things. She had caused immeasurable pain. For thousands of years, she had been a monster. No punishment would be too severe for her crimes. She deserved the exile. She deserved worse. She was guilty of everything they accused her of and more. The chamber was silent. Many had expected her to rage, to threaten, but this was something different. This was accountability. But Yura continued. She said she wanted them to understand something. The exile had not reformed her. The punishment had not made her better. For centuries on that dead moon, she had only grown worse. The isolation had driven her mad. The suffering had increased her rage. If things had continued, she would have stayed that way until she finally died. A monster to the very end. The council had been right to fear her and right to remove her. But they had been wrong about one thing. They had been wrong to think that punishment alone could change anyone. She told them about Daiho, about how he had found her at her lowest point, how he could have left her to suffer, how he could have reported her location and let them finish her. But he had not. He had simply helped, not because she deserved it, not because he expected anything in return, just because it was the right thing to do. His kindness had done what centuries of punishment could not. It had reminded her that she could be something other than a monster. That change was possible. The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members were moved by her words. Others were skeptical. A representative from the Thalen Collective, whose worlds Yura had devastated millennia ago, stood up. He demanded to know why they should believe her. How could they trust that this was real and not just manipulation? How many times had criminals claimed to be reformed only to return to their old ways? Yura met his gaze. She said they should not trust her. Trust had to be earned through actions, not words. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking for the chance to prove she had changed. Then Deho spoke. He had been silent until now. His voice was quiet in the huge chamber, but everyone strained to hear him. He said he was not a politician or a scientist. He was just a farmer. But he knew about soil. about how land that seemed dead could be brought back to life with patience and care. You could not force plants to grow. You could not punish them into being healthy. You could only provide the right conditions and give them time. People, he thought, were not so different. He told them about his farm on Taiwan 7, about the crops growing in toxic soil, about the flowers blooming in a valley that had known only death. He said Yura helped him now. She used her fire to warm greenhouses. She helped till the earth. She protected the crops from the harsh conditions. The most feared being in the galaxy was now spending her days helping vegetables grow. If that was not change, he did not know what was. His words were simple, but they carried weight. This was someone who had lived the reality they were debating. Yejin spoke next. As a military commander, her opinion mattered. She described what she had witnessed on Taiwan 7, the genuine bond between the farmer and the dragon, the careful way Yura controlled her power, the peace that existed in that valley. She said she had come prepared for war and found a garden instead. She admitted she had been skeptical at first, but after spending time observing them, she believed the change was real. She recommended the council consider rehabilitation rather than continued imprisonment. The debate continued for hours. The council was deeply divided. Some species could not forgive what Yura had done to their ancestors. Others saw an opportunity to try a different approach to justice. The human delegation, new to galactic politics, spoke passionately about second chances. The Krell, ancient and wise, pointed out that their own species had once been warlike and had reformed over millennia. Even the energy beings of the luminous collective, usually silent in such matters, offered their perspective. They said that beings of pure energy could see things others could not. They could see the change in Yura's essence. The darkness was still there, but it was no longer in control. Finally, High Counselor Ithera called for silence. She said the council needed to make a decision that would set precedent for generations. They could continue their old ways, believing that some beings were beyond redemption, or they could try something new, something inspired by what had happened on a forgotten moon. She called for a vote. Should Yura be allowed to remain free under certain conditions? Should the galaxy embrace a policy of rehabilitation alongside punishment? The vote was close, very close. But after hours of deliberation, the decision came down. Yura would be granted conditional freedom. She would have to report regularly to the council. She would be monitored. Any sign of her old behavior would result in immediate action. But she would be allowed to live. More importantly, the council agreed to establish what they called the Deho Doctrine, a new policy stating that even the worst criminals deserve the opportunity for genuine rehabilitation. Not just punishment, but actual care and support to help them change. The galaxy reacted with mixed feelings. Some celebrated, others protested, but everyone talked about it. Humanity, the newest species in the galactic community, had influenced one of the most significant policy changes in Federation history. Not through military might or technological superiority, but through simple compassion. The idea spread that humans had something to teach the older races, a perspective that had been lost over millennia of complicated politics and ancient grudges. Yura and Deho returned to Taiwan 7. The farm was exactly as they left it. The plants had survived, though some needed attention. Deho got to work immediately. Yura helped him, grateful to be back in the quiet valley. But their peace did not last long. The council had a proposal. They wanted Yura to become an ambassador for the Deho Doctrine, to travel to places where the forgotten and condemned were kept, to try to help them the way Deho had helped her. At first, Deho said no. He wanted to stay on his farm. He wanted the simple life he had built. But Yura asked him to consider it. She said there were others out there suffering as she had suffered. Others who might change if given the chance. She could not do this work alone. She needed him. She needed his patience, his quiet wisdom, his willingness to see beyond the surface. After a long silence, Deho agreed, but only if they could return to the farm regularly. The plants needed tending. Their first mission took them to a prison planet called Keswick. Thousands of criminals were kept there, deemed too dangerous for normal society. Most had given up hope of ever leaving. Yura and Deho arrived not with weapons or threats, but with seeds and farming equipment. They established a garden in the prison yard. They taught inmates how to grow food, how to care for living things. It seemed too simple to work, but slowly changes began to happen. Hardened criminals found purpose in nurturing plants. Violent beings learned patience. It was not a perfect solution. Some inmates did not change, but many did. Enough to matter. Word spread about their work. Other facilities requested their help. Yura and Deho traveled from world to world. They never claimed to have all the answers. They just shared what had worked for them. Kindness, patience, meaningful work. The chance to be something better. Some places embraced their methods. Others rejected them. But the conversation had started. The galaxy was beginning to question whether punishment alone was enough. Whether beings deserve the chance to grow just like plants in difficult soil. Years passed. The Deho Doctrine became an established part of galactic law. Rehabilitation centers were built based on the principles Deho and Yura demonstrated. Not all of them worked. Success rates varied. But for the first time, the galaxy was trying. They were giving their worst criminals the same chance that Yura had received. The chance to change. Many failed. But some succeeded, and those successes gave hope to millions. The Federation monitoring station detected the anomaly first. Tay-17 was supposed to be a dead moon. The sensors were only there as a formality, checking every few months that the dragon was still trapped. But the latest scan showed something impossible. There was heat in the Western Valley. Not just the heat signature of the dragon, but something else. Something small and regular, like fires being lit. Like someone living there. The technician who saw the reading thought it was a mistake. He ran the scan again. Same result. The report went up the chain of command. A clerk sent it to a supervisor. The supervisor sent it to a manager. The manager sent it to the Galactic Council. Within a week, the council was in emergency session. Someone was on Tay-17. Someone was near the dragon. The possibilities were terrifying. Had Yura somehow called for help? Was someone trying to free her? Had she taken a hostage? The council needed to know immediately. They sent a scout ship first, a small fast vessel with advanced sensors. It entered the system quietly and scanned the moon from a safe distance. The readings confirmed the worst fears. There was a human settlement in the Eastern Valley. One human, and more shocking, there was activity in the Western Valley near the dragon. The dragon appeared to be moving around more than in previous scans. The scout ship took pictures and hurried back to report. The pictures caused chaos in the council chambers. The dragon was outside. She was moving. And there appeared to be plants growing in her valley. Plants. On a dead moon. Next to the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. The council argued for days. Some wanted to send an attack force immediately. Others wanted more information first. Eventually, they decided to send a military expedition, led by Commander Hyejin, one of their best officers. Hyejin was a practical woman. She had fought in 3 wars and survived them all through careful planning. She did not believe in taking unnecessary risks. When she read the briefing about Tay-17, she insisted on taking a full battle fleet, 6 warships, armed with enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Whatever was happening on that moon, she would be ready for it. The fleet arrived at Tay-17 2 weeks after the council meeting. Hyejin ordered a full scan of the moon before landing. What she saw made no sense. The human settlement in the Eastern Valley was a simple farm. Greenhouses, solar panels, and a small shelter. Nothing military. Nothing dangerous. The Western Valley was even stranger. The dragon was there, but she appeared to be helping tend to plants. Plants that definitely should not be growing on this moon. And there was a human walking between the farm and the dragon's valley. Walking, not running. Not hiding. Just walking like it was a normal thing to do. The fleet landed in the Eastern Valley surrounding Deho's farm. Marines poured out of the ships, weapons ready. They expected a fight, or at least some resistance. Instead, they found a middle-aged man calmly harvesting vegetables in his greenhouse. Deho looked up when the soldiers surrounded him. He showed no fear, no surprise. He just looked at them like they were interrupting his work. Which, from his perspective, they were. Hyejin approached him personally. She was in full combat armor, her hand near her weapon. She demanded to know what he was doing on this moon. Why he was near the dragon. What his relationship with the monster was. Deho looked at her for a moment. Then he explained in simple words that he was a farmer. He had claimed this land through the Homestead Initiative. The dragon was sick when he found her, so he helped her. It was that simple. Hyejin stared at him. This man was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She asked if he knew who the dragon was. What she had done? Deho shrugged. He said he knew her name was Yura, that she had told him about her past, about the bad things she did, but that was before. She was different now. Hyejin could not believe what she was hearing. This farmer had been living next to the terror of the galaxy for months and treated it like it was nothing special. She asked if the dragon was dangerous. Deho thought about it. Then he said she could be, probably, but she had never tried to hurt him. She was actually quite helpful with the farming. Hyejin decided she needed to see this for herself. She ordered a company of Marines to accompany her to the Western Valley. Deho offered to guide them. He walked ahead, completely unconcerned by the armed soldiers behind him. As they crossed the mountains, the Marines grew more nervous. They were about to face Yura, the dragon who had destroyed entire fleets. They checked their weapons repeatedly. They stayed in tight formation. Deho just walked at his normal pace, hands in his pockets. When they reached the valley, every Marine raised their weapon. There she was, the dragon, Yura. She was even bigger than the old records suggested. Her presence was overwhelming, but she was not attacking. She was using her fire breath very carefully on a patch of soil. The flame was low and controlled. She was warming the ground. When she saw the soldiers, she stopped and looked at them. Her red eyes studied the group. The Marines tensed. Hyejin prepared to give the order to fire. Then Deho walked past the soldiers straight toward the dragon. The Marines wanted to stop him, but Hyejin held up her hand. She had to see what would happen. Deho approached Yura and gestured to a spot on her back. He said something too quiet for the soldiers to hear. The dragon lowered herself carefully. Deho climbed onto her back and examined something. A wound, perhaps, or just a scale that needed attention. He took out a cloth and cleaned the spot. The dragon made a low rumbling sound, almost like a cat purring. Then Deho climbed down, patted her leg, and walked back to the soldiers. Hyejin was speechless. She had just watched a human farmer treat the most dangerous creature in existence like a farm animal, and the dragon had accepted it. More than accepted it. She had seemed to enjoy it. Hyejin lowered her weapon. Her Marines followed her lead. She asked Deho how this was possible. He said it was not that complicated. Yura was hurt, so he helped her. She got better. Now they worked together on the farm. Simple. But it was not simple to anyone else in the galaxy. Hyejin reported back to the council. Her report was detailed and thorough. She described everything she had seen. The farm, the plants in the Dragon's Valley, the clear bond between the farmer and the beast. She concluded that the dragon appeared rehabilitated, that she showed no signs of aggression, that the situation, while unprecedented, did not seem to pose a threat. The council read her report and immediately went into heated debate. News of the situation leaked, as news always does. Within days, it was the biggest story in the galaxy. The dragon was alive. She was being cared for by a human farmer. They were growing plants together. The species that had feared Yura for thousands of years did not know what to think. Some demanded she be destroyed immediately. Others were curious. How had one human succeeded where the entire galaxy had failed? Religious groups called it a miracle. Scientists wanted to study the phenomenon. Politicians argued about what it meant for galactic law. Media ships began arriving at Tay-17, despite council orders to stay away. They took pictures from orbit. They tried to get interviews. Deho ignored them completely. He had work to do. Yura found the attention disturbing. After centuries of isolation, suddenly the entire galaxy was watching her again. But this time they were not watching the monster. They were watching something else. They were watching redemption happen in real time. The council faced a difficult question. They had exiled Yura to die alone and forgotten. They had written her off as beyond redemption. They had told the galaxy that some beings were simply too evil to save. But now one human had proven them wrong. Not with speeches or grand gestures. Not with advanced technology or elaborate plans. Just with basic kindness and hard work. If the council admitted their approach was wrong, what did that say about their authority? What did that say about all the other beings they had condemned? The debate raged for weeks. Meanwhile, on Tay-17, life continued. Deho farmed. Yura helped him. Plants grew. The flowers in the Western Valley bloomed for the first time, bringing color to the gray moon. Neither of them paid attention to the political storm happening around them. They had found something rare in the galaxy: peace, purpose, A second chance. The universe could debate what it meant. They were too busy living it. Finally, the council made a decision. They could not ignore what was happening. They could not pretend it did not matter. They invited both Deho and Yura to appear before them. It was unprecedented. A human farmer and a reformed dragon, called to address the most powerful political body in the galaxy. Heejin was assigned to escort them. She had seen what they had built together. She believed in it. As the ship prepared to leave Taiwan 7, Deho looked back at his farm with worry. Who would water the plants while he was gone? Yura, in a voice that was stronger than it had been in centuries, promised they would return soon. Together. Deho had always been a quiet man. Even as a child, he spoke only when necessary. He preferred to work with his hands rather than make conversation. His family ran a small farm on Earth, growing vegetables and raising animals. While other children played games and made noise, Deho helped his parents in the fields. He found peace in simple work. Planting seeds, watering crops, feeding animals. These tasks made sense to him in a way that the complicated world did not. When humanity joined the Galactic Federation, most people were excited. They wanted to explore the stars. They wanted to visit alien worlds and meet strange beings. They wanted adventure and excitement, but Deho felt overwhelmed by it all. The galaxy was too big, too loud, too complicated. He missed the simple life he knew. He missed dirt under his fingernails and the smell of growing things. The Federation had a program for people like him. They called it the Homestead Initiative. There were thousands of planets and moons that no one wanted. Places that were too remote, too harsh, or too boring for most people. But these places could support farms if someone was willing to work hard enough. The Federation gave these lands away for free to anyone brave or foolish enough to take them. Deho studied the available locations carefully. He did not want excitement. He wanted the opposite. He wanted somewhere quiet where he could work in peace. Most people avoided Taiwan 7. The official report said it was a dead moon with difficult gravity and no life, but there were notes about water beneath the surface and soil that could potentially grow crops. That was all Deho needed to know. He submitted his application. 3 weeks later, he was approved. Most people thought he was crazy. The journey to Taiwan 7 took 2 months on a cargo ship. Deho brought everything he would need. Seeds from Earth, tools for farming, equipment to drill for water, solar panels for power, a small prefabricated shelter, books about agriculture and engineering. He did not bring much for entertainment. Work was his entertainment. When Deho first saw Taiwan 7, he understood why others avoided it. The moon was gray and lifeless. No trees, no grass. No birds in the sky, just endless dust and rocks under a dark sky. The sun was far away and dim. It looked like a place where nothing good could grow. But Deho had worked difficult land before. He knew that with patience and effort, even dead soil could be brought to life. He landed in a valley between 2 mountain ranges. The valley had some protection from the wind. His equipment confirmed there was water deep underground. The soil was poor but not impossible. Deho set up his shelter and got to work. He drilled for water. It took 3 weeks, but he found it. He tested the soil and added nutrients. He set up his solar panels and began building a greenhouse. Every day he worked from sunrise to sunset. He did not mind the hard work. This was what he knew. This was what made sense. Months passed. Deho established his farm. His first crops grew slowly in the greenhouse. Potatoes, carrots, and beans. Nothing fancy, but they grew. He expanded his operation. More greenhouses. More crops. He even started a small area for chickens. The birds seemed confused by the low gravity at first, but they adapted. Deho felt content. He was alone, but he did not feel lonely. The work filled his days with purpose. One morning, Deho woke to a sound he had never heard before. It was deep and terrible. It shook the ground and made dust fall from the ceiling of his shelter. At first, he thought it was an earthquake. But then he heard it again. It was not a natural sound. It was a roar. Something alive was making that noise. Something very large and very angry. Deho had read all the official reports about Taiwan 7. None of them mentioned any life on the moon. He checked his equipment. Everything was working normally. There were no other humans on the moon. He was supposed to be completely alone. But that roar was real. It came again, longer this time, filled with what sounded like pain as much as anger. Deho made a decision. He needed to know what was making that sound. He packed a bag with supplies: water, food, a first aid kit, and some tools. He also brought his rifle, even though he hoped he would not need it. The roaring came from beyond the western mountains. Deho started walking. The gravity made the journey difficult. Every step required more effort than it would on Earth, but he was used to hard work. He walked for hours. When Deho reached the top of the mountain pass, he stopped. In the valley below, he saw something impossible. A dragon, an actual dragon. It was enormous beyond anything he could have imagined. Its body was the size of several buildings. Its wings, even folded, stretched across the valley floor. But this was not the magnificent creature from stories. This dragon looked sick. Its scales were cracked and oozing. Parts of its body were covered in what looked like infections. The smell, even from this distance, was terrible. The dragon lifted its head and roared again. Deho saw pain in that roar. This was not a monster threatening him. This was a suffering creature. He had seen animals in pain before on his family farm: a cow with an infected wound, a dog with a broken leg, a cat that had been hit by a vehicle. The dragon, despite its size and terrifying appearance, reminded him of those animals. It needed help. Most people would have run away. Most people would have called for help or stayed hidden. But Deho had never been like most people. He saw a creature in pain and his instinct was to help. It was that simple. He did not think about danger. He did not consider that this might be the legendary Yura, the terror of the galaxy. He just saw something that needed care. Deho walked down into the valley. Each step was deliberate and calm. He made no sudden movements. He had learned from working with animals that calmness was important. Frightened creatures could be dangerous. He needed to show he was not a threat. The dragon watched him approach. Her red eyes followed his every movement. She could have killed him easily. One breath of fire would turn him to ash. But she did not attack. She seemed curious about this small creature walking toward her. When Deho was close enough, he stopped and looked at the dragon. He studied her wounds. Many were infected badly. Some were old, crusted over with dried fluid. Others were fresh and weeping. The dragon had tried to clean herself, but her body was too large and inflexible. She could not reach most of the injuries. Deho set down his bag and took out his water and clean cloths. He looked at the dragon, making eye contact. Then he simply began to work. He started with a wound on the dragon's foreleg. It was within his reach and not too deep. He poured water on the cloth and gently cleaned away the dirt and infection. The dragon tensed. Deho stayed calm. He worked slowly and carefully. He had cleaned many animal wounds before. The principle was the same, just bigger, much bigger. He cleaned one wound, then moved to another. He did not speak. He did not explain what he was doing. He just worked. The dragon Yura did not understand what was happening. For centuries, she had known only pain and isolation. She expected this small creature to hurt her. Every other being in the galaxy had either feared her or wanted to destroy her. But this one was different. His touch was gentle. The water was cool and soothing on her burning wounds. For the first time and longer than she could remember, someone was helping her. Not hurting, not ignoring, helping. After several hours, Deho had cleaned several wounds. His water was running low. His arms were tired. But he had made progress. The dragon seemed calmer. Her breathing had steadied. Deho stepped back and looked at his work. There were dozens more wounds that needed attention. This would take many visits. He nodded to himself, packed his supplies, and started the long walk back to his farm. Behind him, the dragon watched him go with eyes that held something new. A tiny spark of hope in an ocean of pain.